We're here for Hate Illness 2023, and I would like to present our presenter, Bill Foss. Now, it looks like we've got what about, oh, where are my notes? 20, 25 people here on the call, 27 people on the call today. Thank you for being here. So that should give us enough people to have some interesting interactions, which I'm looking forward to. Well, let me introduce to you Bill Foss. He is a highly accomplished safety professional with an impressive 34 years of experience in the field. Now, I did promise Bill I wouldn't brag about his extensive background, which includes serving as an EMT. He's also served as a medical first aid trainer, not to mention his experience with facility analysis for Cal OSHA and fire code compliance, developing of IIPs, training safety managers and supervisors in effective safety management, and developing disaster preparedness programs. So don't worry, Bill, I'm not gonna brag about you or worry them with all those Emmy worthy performances through your safety career, all the awards you've won, but without further ado, I'd like to introduce Bill Foss.
Hello, friends. It is a pleasure and an honor to be of service to Safety Center again, and welcome. I'd like to start off by asking you to please temporarily mute your microphones. Now, there will be some times that I'll be inviting you to respond to questions, and there will be some polls where you will raise your electronic hand. Those of you who are familiar with Zoom, of course, know how to do that. You click on the little icon and do the raise hand. Let's get right into it. We're here because of the fact that, of course, summer is coming up, and it is going to be a hot one. It almost always is in Southern California, and it has been progressively getting worse. There's actually a Cal OSHA regulation about working in hot environments, and training for both workers and supervisors is required. But why is there a regulation on this? Does OSHA have nothing to do but pass more laws just to irritate managers and supervisors, give them a little more paperwork? Because they're short of that, of course. In 2005, Cal OSHA instituted an emergency regulation on heat illness prevention after 3 California workers died in a single week from heat stress: a farm worker, a roofer, and a paving contractor. 2 more workers died in the following week. Almost 30 were hospitalized in that month. It was recognized that workers were dying of the heat and that their health and even their lives were in danger because heat had never been legally identified as a workplace hazard that required anticipation, control, and response. An example of where laws come from. Never lose sight of the fact that every OSHA regulation comes from being, well, someone was injured or killed. California was the first in the nation to specifically recognize heat as a hazard. Federal OSHA now recognizes heat stress as an occupational risk that is citable, and several state OSHA plans now have specific standards on this topic. The regulation was amended and updated in 2010 in order to provide guidance for employers in following the law and protecting worker safety. This training is interactive. You can plan on being involved in it. Think about what you need to know, and you'll be asked to contribute your questions and feedback during the session. There are also some polls that you will need to respond to as well, so please be ready for those. Get this going. Let's see whether any of us have been affected by this problem. You have your electric hands that you can raise, so let's test those. Poll on the subject. How many of you, thinking back, can remember a time that you have been overheated to the point of feeling weak, dizzy, or sick, or other people were concerned about your well-being? Hands. Three participants. Raise a 4. Okay, so 4 people, you've had that happen to you. Me too. Often the worker having the problem will say they're all right and be focused on completing the job they're doing, not slowing down their crew, rather than taking care of themselves. Hang on, I'm screen sharing and my screen has all kinds of You can see that while there are some things I do well, being a Zoom king is not one of them. All right. When you see that someone is having a problem, that's when your knowledge and training have to kick in to effectively respond. Our job as safety professionals and business leaders is to recognize the dangers of heat exposure, know the symptoms, understand prevention, understand and follow OSHA standards and organizational policies, communicate effectively with our teams, and respond effectively in the event of a personal heat stress emergency. As part of this presentation, we're going to be discussing the regulation and how to follow it. Let's remember, it's not about the law. It's about the safety of you and your coworkers. So let's talk heat. First of all, what is normal body temperature? Hey, that's a question. I'm not the only one who gets to talk around here. What's normal? Someone, anyone, unmute yourself. Let me know what you think. What is the normal body temperature for a healthy person?
98.6.
Well, the average human temperature is indeed 98.6 as an average, but a person can be healthy in a temperature range of 96 to 99 degrees. That's not much of a variation. Just 2 degrees above average is unhealthy. How high a body temperature is survivable? How high can your core, the center of your body, get, and the person still makes a full recovery? Okay, let's give a guess. Unmute yourself. Someone, anyone, give me an answer.
104? I have no idea.
Okay, somebody else. Go higher. That's a clue.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay, no Googling.
112.
112. Go higher.
118.
An Atlanta worker named William Jones survived a verified internal body temperature of 115.8 degrees and had no lasting injury. In the newspapers, they nicknamed him the Human Torch. However, a body temperature over 103 is serious enough that the medical treatment will be needed. Over 104, hospitalization, and 109 can be fatal. Potential effects of heat stress are internal organ damage, brain damage, permanent seizure disorders, even death. The effects of a single heat stress incident can change your life or even end it. And when is heat stress most likely to happen? Well, that's easy, when it's hot. Okay, how hot? In workers who have prolonged exposure, this has happened in temperatures of 80 degrees. So that's not real hot. That's a normal summer day in California. Some requirements for oversight and site safety are required at that threshold level of 80 degrees. So heat stress is not confined to extraordinary times of blazing heat. The danger of injury is increased when it's as hot or hotter outside your body as inside your body. So if the temperature above 95 degrees, there are additional requirements standard. We'll get to those in a few minutes. Right now, let's get to some of the things that you might see or feel associated with heat exposure. A frequent complaint among workers is heat rash, also called prickly heat. It's what happens when pores are blocked and perspiration gets trapped under the skin. It's a rash and it itches like crazy. Sometimes people who scratch the area with the rash can get infections from the open sores. So it could lead to something more serious. Workers who are exposed to oil mists or chemicals that leave a residue on the skin are more likely to experience prickly heat, particularly if they do not frequently wash the areas of exposure with soap and warm water. By practicing good hygiene and wearing clothes that wick away moisture, the problem usually goes away within a day or two. But this is not a form of heat damage that requires any workplace attention. But you might want to let your workers who wear clothing that holds moisture in or wear PPE know that this could be a problem. This is one reason that cartridge respirator face pieces need to be cleaned after each use, since the face piece is more likely to hold perspiration against the skin if it's not cleaned. Workers will benefit by taking a cool shower after work, but of course you can't force them to do that. They might think that you're weird, imagining them in the shower, which Cal OSHA has ruled is kind of rude. Stage 1 is heat cramps. Heat cramps are muscular pain, possibly along with trembling in the affected area. These are simply the body's muscles' response when they've been depleted of electrolytes. Electrolytes are minerals found in our bloodstream, organs, and muscles. Your body contains substances such as sodium, calcium, and potassium that enable essential biochemical reactions. But something happens when we work hard, particularly in high heat. We sweat. Our body is putting moisture on the surface of the skin so that as it evaporates, it'll cool us down. That's why we sweat. When we sweat, we don't just lose water, but the minerals as well. Simple water alone won't replenish what was lost. If muscles become low on these key substances, they spasm and cause pain or weakness. That's heat cramp. The first symptom you can really feel. Actually, your whole body is affected by this problem. You just can't feel most of what's happening inside. The typical treatment for heat cramps is replacement of the electrolytes using sports drinks, electrolyte tablets, or fruits, bananas and apples, which are high in potassium. A common electrolyte replacement is a sports drink, is Gatorade. Anyone, where was Gatorade invented?
University of Florida.
Right. So that their football team, the Gators, would perform better on hot days. They had replaced their electrolytes and the opposing team was just drinking water. Now, don't think that I'm recommending this stuff. It contains a very high amount of sugar, as well as a number of artificial colors and flavors. This training is not sponsored by the Gatorade. By themselves, heat cramps are not a medical emergency. However, they can be painful and prevent a person from doing work. They're also an early body indicator of heat stress and should be treated immediately by moving the worker to a cooler area, giving them time to rest, and providing electrolyte replacement. Sometimes heat cramps can manifest hours after work, particularly in the legs. Sudden pain may wake the worker up in the middle of the night with trembling legs. Stage 2, heat exhaustion. This is most likely when the air temperature is above 90 degrees. When the air temperature outside the body is higher than body temperature, the body can't radiate heat away. A person can faint from the heat, called heat syncope. Syncope is the medical term for loss of consciousness. Some of the symptoms of heat exhaustion are physical, and others are emotional. A person may drip with sweat. Cheeks may become bright red, and elsewhere may be pale. Rapid panting breathing through the mouth is common, and the person may begin to show changes in behavior, such as irritability, confusion, and lack of concentration. They may complain of headaches and body aches. Tongue will swell as a symptom of dehydration, causing the person to slur their speech or speak very slowly and deliberately in order to be understood. Slurred speech is an important symptom of heat stress. You're communicating with someone by walkie-talkie or phone, and their speech pattern is not normal, you should be concerned and inquire how they're feeling. Send someone to check on them. Often, people don't realize that they are experiencing heat stress. They're focused on getting the job done, not how they feel. They may experience loss of coordination and balance, which can cause staggering, falls from ladders, and slip and fall accidents. Abdominal pain and vomiting are not unusual. Too often, the worker blames these symptoms on something that they ate. Anytime that someone throws up in high heat, it should be a matter of concern. And if the symptom was caused by bad food, that alone will make any heat stress on the body worse than it otherwise would be. Rapid response by coworkers can be very helpful and end this emergency if the right actions are taken and the right things are available. We'll get to that soon. Heat exhaustion is not necessarily a 911 event, but the worker should be evaluated before returning to the job. At a minimum, they need time, rest, in a cool area, plenty of water. Someone showing these symptoms should not be allowed to try and drive themselves to a doctor or clinic, as impairments in their judgment, vision, and reaction time cause them to be in a car accident. Stage 3, heat stroke. The body's temperature regulation mechanism starts to fail. Skin will be hot and dry. If they cease to sweat, that is a very important symptom that should be reported to a 911 operator. When the patient is in full heat stroke, the body's circulatory systems begin to malfunction. Blood and oxygen are not evenly distributed. The result may be skin that is not the same color all over the body, or is red in color. Fingernails and lips may turn blue from lack of oxygen. The person is likely to be staggering, incoherent, appearing as if drunk. Try to hold their shoulder or otherwise provide stabilization as you get them to a place that is safer for them to be, as they're very likely to collapse. Seizures may occur. These may be localized in the arms or legs, but could involve the whole body. If you see these symptoms, then the patient is in a life-threatening condition. Approximately 30% of people with untreated heat stroke don't survive. Let's talk people. Some people are at a higher risk than others for heat illness, but take a look at some of the factors on this list. Some of them we can talk about with our employees. Some we can't. But we can speak about the first 5 things, about the kind of physical labor that they might need to do and where it would be done and how it could be more demanding in high heat. We can discuss the PPE that they're going to wear. We can advise them to wear light-colored clothing if they aren't issued a uniform, and that breathable cotton is a better choice than synthetics that trap heat. All of these are acceptable. Beyond that, welcome to the minefield, the things we can't ask about. If they smoke or vape, if they're diabetic, if they're pregnant, if they're using laxatives, can you ask them about these things? Of course not. That information is private, personal. As part of the educational program that goes along with heat stress prevention, we can inform them that these personal conditions increase their personal risk. That's all we can do. The first sentence of the revised California OSHA standard gives it a very unusual name: the Maria Isabel Vasquez Jimenez Heat Illness Standard. Who is Maria Isabel Vasquez Jimenez? She was a 17-year-old farm worker, Central Coast Vineyard, who earned $8 an hour picking grapes. On May 14, 2008, she'd been on the job for 3 days. She was new to this type of work and received no training except how to pick grapes. It was hard work, but she needed the money. She was engaged to be married and already pregnant. Her shift began at 6 a.m. when it was already over 70 degrees. It was above 85 degrees at 10 a.m. and by noon, over 95. Workers were only given one water break for 10 minutes. The water was a 10-minute walk away. No one got any, unless they brought their own. Maria Isabel hadn't brought her own. She collapsed at 3:30 p.m. after more than 9 hours of hard labor in the blazing sun. For at least 5 minutes, the foreman did nothing but tell her to get up. Then he told other workers to put her in the back seat of a van, which had no air conditioning, and put a wet cloth on her. She remained unconscious. After a while, the foreman told the driver to drive to a drugstore, buy some rubbing alcohol, and pour it on her to see if that would wake her up. When that failed, the driver took her and her fiancé to a clinic. Her body temperature was more than 108 degrees. Maria Isabel never regained consciousness and died. California's emergency regulation on heat illness had already been on the books for 3 years, and it failed to save her. This is the face of the law when the law fails. It is very rare for a Cal OSHA standard to have a dead worker's name on it. It is there to remind both employers and OSHA compliance officers that this is about preventing illness, death from a predictable, recognized workplace condition. Where does the standard apply? The simple answer, everywhere outdoors. It's most frequently cited in agricultural. Other industries have been cited as well. Some people have pointed out that indoor jobs can be very hot. Foundries, industrial laundry, large bakeries, and that's true. Citations have been issued, but some businesses have successfully appealed these by protesting that there isn't sufficient guidance in the general industry standard on this issue. Now some new information, May 2023. Cal OSHA will begin holding hearings. On May 18th, the Standards Board will consider expanding the heat illness regulation to indoor workers. Public and professional comment will be accepted until 5 p.m. on May 18th, right around the corner. If the heat stress issue is important to you, make your voice heard. You can go to the Department of Industrial Relations, Cal OSHA website for information on how to contribute. And no, you don't need to be there. If someone is driving on a hot day, then their vehicle is an outdoor workplace. And the standard applies if the climate in the operator's compartment can't be controlled. This might be a worker transportation van or bus, a Jeep without doors, or a riding mower or electric cart. If the driver and crew have air conditioning, but also need to perform physical labor outside the vehicle, then they will be at risk of heat stress due to the sudden transition from the air-conditioned cab to work in the sun. Let's take a look at the required elements of a heat illness prevention program. There has to be water. Of course, other liquids could actually be better, but the OSHA standard says water must be provided. You can have some of the other drinks. There has to be shade so that a cooler environment is available for tired workers and breakers. There has to be an awareness of current weather conditions by management and supervisors, an anticipation of changes so that they can plan on how work will be conducted. For workers who are not used to the heat or to their tasks, there must be a transition period when temperatures or work duty changes cause increased risk to the unprepared worker, called acclimatization. There has to be a regular system of routine and emergency communications that everyone understands how to use. There must be a written procedure for emergency response effectively disseminated. There has to be a defined organizational plan to accomplish every one of these goals. There has to be training for employees in what they need to know, cooperate in the program, and for supervisors, provide instructions on their role as leaders and how to prepare, modify the program as needed to address work conditions, recognize an emergency, and provide timely and effective organizational response. Okay, question. Who is going to get all of these things done? Anyone? Who's going to do this?
The employer.
Right. For a lot of you, look in the mirror. This is your job. You should have this program if your employees are at risk of heat stress. And it has to be developed to meet the work tasks of every employee. There is a model program at the Department of Industrial Relations Cal OSHA site. But model programs are a skeleton that you have to flesh out with specifics for your workplace and type of work. Standard recognizes that the effects of heat on the body depends on more than just air temperature, but can also be influenced by humidity, reflected heat, absorbed heat, wind speed, type of work being done, and the clothing and PPE worn by workers. Some examples. Some surfaces absorb heat or reflect it, and a grass-covered field will have a different heat load than a concrete-topped tennis court. Of course, anything dark-colored retains heat more than anything light-colored. Someone shoveling dirt will have a greater buildup of heat in their body than a person using string trimmer, edging, or using a riding lawnmower. And PPE traps heat. Even those vests with the mesh, the high-vis vest, oh, you wear one on a real hot day, you'll feel the heat doesn't all go out through those holes. It stays with you. Really, there's only one kind of PPE that doesn't trap heat. What is it? Anyone, think about all the PPE you put on your body. What is the one kind that doesn't trap heat?
It's even a hat would, wouldn't it?
Sure does.
Yeah.
Safety glasses.
Have you ever noticed your safety glasses on a hot day getting coated with perspiration? And yeah, they trap some heat, not a whole lot, but safety glasses and particularly face shields do trap heat around the face.
Yeah.
Okay, it's hearing protection. Earplugs and earmuffs don't just, they do. I mean, with maybe tiny amount, but no, it's the one class of PPE that doesn't trap a lot of heat. And of course, sunlight carries heat with it, so shade is an environmental protection that must be available. That's where that hat you mentioned can come into use. That's personal portable shade. The 3395 standard references acclimatization, the way the body gradually adjusts to hot environment. Newly assigned workers are at greater risk of heat stress as the body gradually adjusts to the environmental conditions. This is a gradual process. It can take up to 2 weeks for a worker to get completely accustomed to working in the heat. Sudden exposure to heat after being in a cool environment can literally take your breath away. It's a regular occurrence in summer for people stepping outside air-conditioned airport terminals in Las Vegas and Phoenix. They drop to the ground. They can't get a breath because they go from moist air-conditioned air to dry, hot desert air, and they drop. There are even monitors outside some airports to make sure that when people hit the ground, that they get rapid attention. The employer must be aware of which workers are newly assigned to work tasks, and their wellness should be monitored by a more experienced worker supervisor. One way of getting heat out of your body is exhaling it. Someone who is short of breath will have a reduced ability to shed heat. Of course, the quality of what you breathe has an effect upon your respiratory volume. Poor air quality increases the incidence of hospital admissions from heat stress. Particulates from wildfire smoke can be invisible and cause shortness of breath for people downwind an amazing distance away. In 2020, 3 major fires burned in the Los Angeles area. One of them was called the Lake Fire. The Lake Fire burned from August 12 to September 28. We're talking a month and a half of constant fire. It generated a smoke plume that carried particulates far enough that respiratory distress admissions to hospitals doubled in Phoenix, 380 miles away. The incidence of heart attacks and strokes went up over 20%. The smoke caused increases in respiratory emergencies as far away as Philadelphia. Yes, a California wildfire was making people in Pennsylvania sick. Another hazard is topical. Natural depression, as valleys can trap pollutants from cars and industrial processes when there's no wind to move the air. Workers within a mile of freeways that have high traffic of diesel trucks experience a greater level of respiratory distress than those who are more than a mile away from the freeway. Workers who have pre-existing conditions, such as asthma and allergies, may experience shortness of breath that impedes their body's ability to shed internal heat. Seasonal allergies can cause complications for them in the spring. This year's heavy rains have caused an unusual bloom of greenery and an associated increase in both measurable pollen levels and respiratory hospital admission. We can expect this to get worse. We need shade. The standard defines shade, blockage of direct sunlight. Almost anything in sunlight will get hotter, so there has to be shade to cool off in. Cal OSHA has a very practical way of telling you whether your shade is sufficient. Look for shadows. If there are shadows in the area of shade, your shade is not adequate. Of course, shade alone is not everything. A shaded area that is paved in asphalt may not be cool enough, and a car is not shade unless it is cool inside. If it's projected to be over 80 degrees, then shade needs to be readily available nearby. Sometimes natural shade will be available from trees or structures. If it's not available, you've got to bring your own. Survey the work site prior to commencement of work, and if there is natural shade, then remember that the position of the sun in the sky will change, and that means that the shaded areas may change and be diminished. Practice quickly deploying shade structures and plan to properly secure them to the ground against wind, as sometimes these have been known to be blown over on top of workers. Cause of injury, safety program. Yeah, that's going to look good in there. There must be enough shade for everyone, including on a meal break when the whole crew might need to be there at once. The crew should have a place to sit that is not on hard or hot ground. And if the work crew moves, the shade has to move with them. Sometimes a worker will say that they need quick time in the shade, and remember a basic rule: if someone says they need a break, they get a break. Encourage workers to take a rest in the shade every once in a while, even if they don't ask for one. What? Tell my crew to kick back and relax on company time? Are you crazy? How is any work going to get done? Okay, let's be honest. It's possible that on hot days, less work will get done. That's a better outcome than having someone in the hospital, or worse, because we weren't adaptable to the needs of the environment and workload. If someone says they need time in the shade, they shouldn't be there alone, in case they begin to suffer the symptoms of a health emergency. Someone should be with them who can activate the emergency plan if needed. And no, they don't clock out while they're resting. The likelihood of heat injury is greatly reduced when the air temperature is below 80 degrees, but if workers request shade, that should be provided for workers. It adds to their comfort and reduction of risk. Workers must be offered a preventative recovery period, PRP. The PRP, preventative recovery period, is basically a timeout when someone is beginning to show signs of mild heat stress, such as heat cramps or heavy sweating. A worker may be transported to a shade area for that preventative recovery period, which means they're given some time to feel better after a mild overheating. The preventative recovery period in the standard must last at least 5 minutes. If the worker is fully recovered, then they can go back to work. But the fact that they use this time should be recorded by a supervisor, so that afterwards you can use this to demonstrate that the company is taking care of workers. Let's talk water. Of course, we need water to stay alive, even more so in high heat. The use of muscles heats up the body in any environment, which is why hard exercise in a cool room still makes us sweat. When you put hard work together with high heat, the problem is magnified. How much sweat, and therefore liquid, can a person lose in an hour? Let's throw this open. there was a study of telephone linemen in Phoenix wearing full PPE who are acclimatized to over 100-degree weather. How much liquid did they lose in an hour? Anyone? And for the people who weren't raised metric, let's put this in the old cups and quarts and gallons so that people don't have to say, oh, how much is a liter? How much water did they
No
lose?
idea. Also, feel free to respond in the chat if you don't want to unmute, but please do unmute and participate if you can. If you've got a guess.
I'll say 2 pints. I don't know. I don't know.
I think a gallon.
They'd be swimming in their own liquid though. That's what I was thinking about.
It's 2 quarts of sweat per hour.
2 quarts
Oh
per
my God.
hour.
Per hour. Yes.
That could turn into a
That's-
gallon.
That's 3 to 4 pounds of water weight lost an hour. The recommended amount of water to provide for your workers is 1 quart of cool water per employee per hour, or a minimum of 2 gallons for an 8-hour shift. However, if demand is greater than that, whatever the workers want to drink, they need to get. Oh, by the way, make sure that a restroom is nearby with everyone drinking this much water. It can get kind of gross if you don't have sanitation facilities nearby. You may need to make sure it's potable water. A question, anyone, what is the term potable? What's that mean?
Safe to drink.
Yeah, safe to drink. What is not potable water? The worker cannot simply be given access to a garden hose and have it called potable water. It isn't. The temperature of water running through the warm garden hose may be nearly as high as the external temperature. If the hose has been in the sun for a while, the hose could also be contaminated with toxic materials, bacteria, or insects such as spiders. Quick poll with the electric hands. How many of you have taken a drink from a garden hose? Put up your hand. All right, some of you. Oh, lots of you. Think of how many spiders you've swallowed. Okay, don't think about that. Never mind. Did you know that many garden hoses are made from recycled car tires? Yeah, they can contain asbestos, fiberglass, even lead. That's why water from a garden hose is not considered potable unless the hose is labeled as made from food-grade materials. Probably none of the hoses you can buy at Home Depot are food grade. Therefore, a garden hose, irrigation line, or sprinkler may not be used to refill a drinking vessel. If you're using a water dispenser, such as the one shown, workers must be provided individual cups, because otherwise you know that some yo-yo is going to put his mouth on that thing and then yell, next. You don't want to be behind that guy. All right, there's some things people shouldn't drink in hot environments. We've got 4 answers to that. Let's see what you have to say. What should you not drink on a hot day? Anybody? And you can put it in the chat if you wish.
Coffee,
Why?
alcohol,
Ooh, you're right on
Energy
both.
drinks.
soda.
There's one
Monster.
more and it'll surprise you.
Got it. Energy drinks.
Oh, that's in there, but there's another one. Well, let's start off with caffeine. Caffeine is bad for 3 reasons. It raises blood pressure, which can make a person more susceptible to fainting, heart attack, or stroke. It's also a diuretic, meaning that it promotes urination and therefore dehydration. And caffeine constricts blood vessels so that it's harder for the body to redistribute heat. A lot of people like the taste of a cold Coca-Cola on a hot day. Personally, I like iced tea, but both are bad ideas because of the caffeine inhibiting the body cool down. Energy drinks, you got that right too. They're not the same as sport drinks. They usually contain large amounts of caffeine, but even the caffeine-free ones often contain ingredients that are likely to raise blood pressure to unhealthy levels on a hot day. Common ingredient is taurine, which increases the effects of caffeine. Some people have had seizures after drinking energy drinks in hot weather. And of course, yes, you're right, alcohol. It dehydrates the body, and intoxication is much more rapid in high heat. Of course, you shouldn't be drinking on the job. Fairly sure that's against some kind of company policy. But drinking even a moderate amount of alcohol still makes the person more susceptible to heat stress the next day. Workers need to be educated about being more careful about heat stress the day after they have consumed alcohol. Someone who drinks a half pint of alcohol loses nearly 3/4 of a pint getting it out of the body. And surprise, ice water is a bad idea. Gosh, you would think that would be perfect. But if you drink very cold water, the temperature imbalance can send the body in shock. It can result in severe stomach pain, nausea, even a sudden loss in blood pressure resulting in unconsciousness. The water should be cool, not ice cold. Workers need training. And let's be clear about what training is under OSHA standards. It isn't giving someone a handout and telling them to sign saying that they read it. No, it involves a teacher who is knowledgeable about the topic, customization of the information to meet the work activities and work site, and the ability to ask questions. The little paper handout doesn't make them. Here's what your workers need to know. When heat illness might happen, which workers might be more susceptible, the importance of water and shade, the process of getting acclimatized, and what heat illness might feel like and look like. Your teams have to understand what heat can do to them and the personal factors such as weight and age that can affect them individually so that they can make better informed decisions about their level of risk. They might make different decisions in what they eat and drink, and fabrics that they wear, and whether they wear a hat, even if they don't like hat hair and look silly in a hat. You can recommend avoiding caffeinated drinks and tobacco use, but you can't enforce those when workers are on break or consuming personal beverages. They need to know how to alert supervisors if a problem is developing, how to maintain communications with other teams, activate the emergency plan, direct EMS responders to their site, and cooperate in a follow-up investigation promptly to determine what happened. Your team needs to know that management is doing the right thing and that safety is more important than productivity. A lot of companies say that. Not all of them live it. They need to know that your organization lives it. They must have the basic requirements of the standard explained and how you'll make them happen and where to get more information. They should be shown the locations of water, portable shade devices, first aid kits, and routes for the transport of an ill or injured person. The workers need to be reassured that they will always have the right to a healthy work environment and the right to report any deficiencies to upper management without fear of retaliation. They must know your site-specific emergency plan. When a worker is transferred to a new area, given a new assignment, or instructed to wear new PPE, they must be educated regarding how their new situation could result in greater or lesser exposure and stress. You as leaders, supervisors, managers need to know the specific requirements of the OSHA standard, procedures at your facility, chain of command, assessment of heat risk, documentation and operational protocol, environmental monitoring, and response to emergencies. And of course, this is an OSHA standard, so there has to be a written plan. If your facility has any outdoor workers, you should assess their risk. At many facilities, the risk is minimal to even zero. This doesn't apply to workers in transit through hot areas on the way to and from work, or those who are not assigned outdoor labor, but simply walk from place to place. A personnel in a guard station or kiosk are covered by the standard. Their activity may not look labor intensive. It's still work. The written program needs to document the policies that you have enacted and the procedures that will implement it. This will include employee training, provision of water and shade, site assessment, worker oversight, environmental monitoring, and emergency planning. It all has to be in writing. It says the plan will detail how things will be done. That means be specific, provide details, include mechanisms for action. Become familiar with your facility's planning so you can communicate with your teams and provide accurate information when questions are asked. Part of the supervisor's job will be to monitor the daily weather, plan in advance for changes in work, and record temperature spikes as the day goes on. This must be documented during times of high heat. There are specific actions required by the state, depending upon the air temperature. Well, how will you know that it's going to be a hot day tomorrow? There are plenty of weather sites that can help. Most of them have a good rate of accuracy for the following day. Do you know that there are free apps for your phone that turn it into a thermometer? Yes. Go to the App Store and check them out for yourself. Not now, we're in a meeting. Okay. Just be aware that some apps actually use the heat sensors in your phone. Those are the good ones. Others just use your GPS data. They get an estimate of the heat in the area. They don't accurately measure the real conditions where you are. Those are the bad ones. They can't provide an accurate measurement of real heat intensity. Some people just run over to a garden supply store and buy a large thermometer that they can put outside where people can see it. They don't cost much. They work well. They're fairly durable and can be seen from a distance. They can even move with your team. If you have flexibility in your team's work assignments, then try and schedule the most strenuous work or that which requires PPE to be done in the morning before it gets too hot. Be prepared to cease work if it gets too hot or if any workers are showing symptoms of heat. The temperature should be recorded at the start of the day and hourly thereafter. If procedures need to be changed, then record when those changes were made and who was affected. Have you ever listened to a weather report and they mentioned the daily heat index? You may have wondered what that was. It measures the interaction between temperature and humidity. Moisture in the air can make it more difficult to disperse heat from the body because perspiration won't evaporate in a humid environment. Your cooling system breaks. The combined effects of heat and humidity can also cause additional stress on the circulatory system. The National Weather Service's heat index will provide an estimation of how hot it will feel to the worker, which may be different than what's on the thermometer. As an example, using the chart shown here, yes, it's a very small chart, but still fairly readable. When it's 88 degrees at low humidity, it feels like, well, 88 degrees. At high humidity affecting the body, though it's 121 degrees. In California summers, winds can bring desert heat to coastal communities. But while these may include high temperatures, they could be low humidity. So let's see. Anyone respond. What is the highest air temperature and ground temperature ever verifiably recorded on Earth? How hot was the air workers were breathing, and how hot was the ground that they were standing on radiating heat? Let's have some people answer. What was the air temperature? What was the ground temperature?
And near a volcano, does that count?
Okay, I'm open to this.
I don't even know.
Oh,
That's
come
a great
on, give it a
question.
shot. You're the one who brought up the lava.
I'm just gonna go with 150 degrees.
150. Oh, gosh, that would be bad. Does anybody
I
else
don't
have
even
different
know.
numbers? Now, are you talking 150, that was the air temperature, or 150 was
Oh,
the
ground
ground temperature?
temperature.
Ground temperature 150, you're saying? How much do you think the air temperature was?
130. I have no idea.
Does anybody else have any ideas?
Please, somebody else guess too, so I'm not the only one.
Yeah, I was thinking about 125, 130 for air, and then the ground would have to be hotter. I don't know how, but then you have to figure humidity. So,
Well, humidity doesn't affect the ground so much. I'll
Ah.
take care of the suspense here. Air
Ah.
temperature was 134 degrees. Ground temperature 200 degrees. Air temperature 134, ground temperature 200. What godforsaken country was this in? Anybody guess?
Death Valley.
You're right. It was us. Furnace Creek, California, over by Death Valley in the summer of 1913. Luckily, the only workers there that day were rattlesnakes, scorpions, tarantulas, and one very overheated meteorologist who was there recording the temperature. When it's above 95 degrees, a contact system needs to be in place and clearly communicated to all workers so that they can stay in communication. This could include periodic checks by a trained supervisor who observes workers for symptoms of heat stress, radio and phone checks on any worker who's alone, and set times to put your tools down and take a drink of water. One is new to their job or recently assigned job duties that involve exposure to high heat, their well-being should be of particular concern, as they may try and keep up with the pace of more experienced team members to show that they fit in. The standard says that newly assigned workers must be closely monitored by a supervisor or someone assigned by the supervisor to do that. If you're a safety manager, speak with your supervisors and leads about work planning and procedures. Make sure that all workers know where the door to your office is and how to use the anonymous system of communication that's required in your injury and illness prevention program. Your supervisor or lead, talk with your management team and listen to your workers. Speak with management about any concerns that you might have, any problems with a worker or team that didn't follow procedures. Ask your crews if there are any concerns and make sure that everyone feels comfortable in reporting problems and proposing solutions. If an actual supervisor is not available to monitor a work crew, team members should be named and educated regarding the procedures to be followed. Part of the job is paying attention to the way that people are working, walking, speaking, and communicating. Buddy system is mandatory in temperatures over 95 degrees, except when work duties make that impossible, such as the driver of material handling equipment, forklifts, or an agricultural. They might have to be alone. A facility emergency plan must be implemented and kept up to date with an adequate number of people trained in first aid to meet the anticipated need. All major training systems, American Red Cross, American Heart Association, HSI Medic First Aid, have information on heat stress. However, you should supplement the information in the first aid and CPR class with additional guidance for your trained teams. In addition, let everyone know how to contact the individuals who are on your CPR and first aid response team. It's a good practice to have their names posted in a prominent area, and any new worker joining the crew should be asked whether they're currently certified in first aid and CPR. Sometimes there's no street address for the area where work is being done, particularly in the construction field. They haven't even given the streets names and addresses yet. Your building. At that point, a way of identifying the location for a 911 operator using landmarks and directions should be determined in advance. If a medical emergency appears to be happening, then what times the symptoms were initially observed should be noted. A timeline should be created of response. When first aid treatment was provided, when the ambulance arrived. Who called? How long did it take for them to get through? All of this needs to be written down. Do the right things. Write them down as you do them. If anything goes wrong, it's important to have a paper trail showing your good faith and that of your organization. It may be necessary to take witness statements or photos in the event of a real emergency in order to show what was happening and not rely on memory. If a compliance officer observes that workers are in an unsafe situation, then the site can be immediately served with an order prohibiting use, or OPU. These are rare, but they exist. That means that all work must stop immediately. If any element of the heat stress program is not in place, all activity may need to come to a halt until that's fixed. What this means to you is that if a compliance officer asks any worker regarding whether they are trained and know the procedures, and they indicate that they don't know these things, the whole job site can be shut down with an OPU, and it won't be allowed to reopen until documentation shows that all outdoor workers have been trained and procedures are adequate to meet the standard. Cal OSHA worker education materials are available in several languages on their website. They're largely targeted at the agricultural industry, but the essential information is applicable to any workplace. I would encourage you to get familiar with the heat information that's on the California website. The people at Cal OSHA, you might be surprised to find out that they're friendly, they're helpful, and they want to help you in your job of protecting workers. You can actually get in touch with a specialist in these matters at heat@dir.ca.gov. That's heat@dir.ca.gov. Safety Center encourages you to learn more about the consultation division of Cal OSHA. It's there to help employers on a confidential basis in maintaining a safe and healthy workplace. Of course, you can call us at Safety Center as well. Helping is what we do. Thank you for allowing Safety Center to be of service to you and to your team.